Hey guys, what's happening? So, metal's like the gift that keeps on giving, and the Immortal Men is a direct product of that. And with a lot of you guys asking me what issues to pick up and tips on what to look out for in upcoming comics, I'm gonna tell you right now, Immortal Men, you're gonna want to keep up with this one. So for all my fellow Dark Knights metal lovers, and for all of us really diving into the new age of heroes, be sure to subscribe so you can catch the spills every week, because we're definitely gonna be digging into a lot about these characters and their background. So also make sure you hit that bell up top so you can get the notifications and we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so the concept of the Immortal Men, we were reintroduced to in Dark Knight's Metal. And I say that because in the earlier issues of Dark Days The Forge and the casting, we also saw the reappearance of Immortal Man himself, who initially appeared in Strange Adventures number 165 back in 1965. So he's been around for a minute, but at the same time his appearances have been few and far between. But that began to change around 1984 when he appeared in Action Comics as one of the Forgotten Heroes, and it was at that point in 1984 where his origin was tied in with Vandal Savage. And this made a lot of sense, especially recently with Dark Knight's Metal, where we got a glimpse of the different discoveries that Hawkman had accumulated over the years, because the Immortal Man originates from the Bear Tribe, and it was in a battle between him and Vandal Adge, who we now know as Vandal Savage, where they were both exposed to this quote alien radiation that made them immortal. But I'm pretty sure in Dark Knight's Metal that's changed, and it's the nth metal, and from here forward that's the source of the immortality for both of them as well as Hawkman. But I guess in time we'll kind of see how exactly that works out, not just for the Immortal Man but for the Immortal Men as well, because much like Hawkman and Hawkgirl, the Immortal Man can be killed, and that's the way his character has been portrayed for a long time. That's nothing new in metal, and when he dies he just comes back differently, but he can be killed by any conventional means of killing someone. Not gonna list those. But as far as the rest of the Immortal Men, not so sure I can say the same for the rest of them, because anytime I see that they're killed, like they're dead, they're gone, because they're vulnerable to mortal wounds in the exact same way. But when these guys die in metal, all you hear is let's pray for these brothers and sisters because they gone, and that's it. But jumping back to early metal, taking references from The Forge, Dark Days, The Forge, and the casting, around the time that the Signal was in the Batcave with Green Lantern, we also got a glimpse at a conversation that the Immortal Man was having at the campus, also known as the 5th house of the Immortals. And this location is important because the campus is like a refuge for the Immortal Men. It's their base of operations, it's where they train and perfect their different abilities. This location is really the cornerstone of their secret society. And it's also here early on in Metal that we get the idea from the Immortal Man when he mentions Elaine Thomas, who's the mother of the Signal, that he offered to Elaine the ability to live forever. And she declined his offer, but it painted the picture and it established the Immortal Man recruiting people for a larger purpose. And even though it seemed like at the time it was referencing directly towards Metal and the invasion of the Nightmare Batman, we learned that that wasn't the case early on when we saw Kendra Saunders, aka Hawkgirl, meet up with a number of the other Immortal Men, including Vandal Savage at the finished stair. And inside you had many people who originated from the first tribes. And when Kendra got there, Vandal made it clear that this location, or this place, was made in preparation for something else. And of course, as we know, they were there to figure out the next step with the disappearance of Batman and dealing with the current situation at the time in Dark Knight's Metal and declaring their plans of using the Anti-Monitor's brain to blow up the Rock of Eternity. But what this also was showing us is that many of the members from the original tribes, they had already been grouping and meeting in a place of secrecy, including the Immortal Man himself. But little did we know at the time that this tied into a teaser that we would see later on at the end of like every issue of Metal. And in that teaser we would see the same kid being chased and being hunted by someone or something at the end of every issue until he's saved by Ghostfist. And when he's saved by Ghostfist, he looks up and he's at the campus. And he feels like he's being led here because in his dreams he also sees the face of the Immortal Man. But at the same time, with all of this coming to him in a dream, and even though it's a dream, it still seems and feels real. But with him having these dreams, his parents of course send him to a shrink, and she tells him, look kid, these dreams aren't real. All it is you hearing about these superheroes and you want to help in some kind of way, and this is a way of your mind just kind of dealing with that. And this is really how we're introduced to Caden Park. And it's crazy because Caden initially opens up to the psychiatrist, and he tells her also when he touches people, he sees things about that person. And she asked him to try it on her, and it worked, but we saw at this point that he decided to switch it up and kind of hide the truth to a certain extent by not telling her what he saw when he touched her hand. But what we also find out is that the fifth house of the Immortals, the campus, the same campus that we saw in Dark Knight's Metal, located 1 mile under Philadelphia, they had been brutally attacked. And with the campus being the house of action, their attack had come from the house of conquest. And these two houses have been at war for countless years. But this particular attack was the most devastating out of any of their encounters with each other. And this is where we see that Windstrider from the House of Conquest had just slaughtered these people. And there's one shot in the comic of him standing over looking at these bodies on the spikes, and that took me back to Dracula Untold for a little bit, which was pretty crazy with those scenes. But Windstrider, who is 361 years old, he can tell by the scent of what remains that 4 people got away, which is insane. But it's also here that we get the introduction to the Infinite Woman, and she's the leader of the House of Conquest, which is the first of the 5, and she wants to make sure that the campus, also known as the House of Action, is completely wiped out. And when we see this in the first issue of Immortal Man, it kind of gives us the gist of the war between these two houses. Because the Infinite Woman, who's the founder of the House of Conquest, and for Immortal Man is the House of Action, otherwise known as the Campus, because of this, at times they refer to each other as brother and sister. And for the House of Conquest, she's recruited over the years with the intention of placing them where she believes they rightfully belong, which is on top of the world, of course. But aside from the founders of these different houses referring to each other as brother and sister, the other Immortals or recruits kind of look at each other as cousins of sorts. At least that's what Windstrider referred to them as before killing them. But also what this does is it gives us a broader scope of the different Immortals we'll see with different abilities, but originating from different periods in time, or even possibly from other multiverses. And I say that because with Barbados, who we later saw in Dark Knight's Metal, wasn't only the dragon, but he had also told Bruce Wayne that he had set in order the beginning for the Bat Tribe by way of using Bruce Wayne, which we found out in Batman Lost, which are some very interesting points, because when the Infinite Woman and Windstrider are having this conversation, the Batman Who Laughs pops up. And I can't help but to think and pull all these different things together, and I could be reading into this too closely. But seeing the Batman Who Laughs here really feels like a hey auntie moment. And I say that because when the Batman Who Laughs speaks to her, he's like, yeah, it's time for us to take our spot at the top, referring to her in the House of Conquest. And it really makes you think back to when the Batman Who Laughs was recruited by Barbados. Like, it makes you think again, like, how did that really go down? Because as of right now, Barbados is still alive. He's just locked up and chained away, and that's where he's gonna stay till some later point, probably in Immortal Man, where either someone will find him or we may even get more story on his background in relation to the other tribes, or maybe even both, who knows. But with the Batman Who Laughs showing up here, still alive after Metal issue number 6, it once again doubles back to a video I did earlier where we were kind of talking about how did this Batman Who Laughs recruit these different Batman going underwater and not drowning. And for me, I just kind of chalked it up to, okay, he has these metal cards that allow him to manipulate reality to a certain extent, but if in fact he was recruited by Barbados and made immortal, then in that case we may have a whole nother set of problems on our hands. Because if this guy can die and come back over and over again like Hawkman, we got some problems. But jumping over to Caden Park, for him at this point, it's been a couple of weeks since he's had these crazy dreams. And before, when he would have these dreams, they'll probably come to him 2 or 3 times a week. And because things had kind of calmed down for him and they were seeming supposedly normal to an extent, and he wasn't sharing everything with his shrink. But because he's doing good, he convinces his mom into letting him go out with some friends after school. But while they're on the subway, he sees the Immortal Man once again. But between him and his friends, he's the only one who sees him. And the weird thing, at least to us, is Immortal Man walks through the subway cart to the next one, which as far as I know is not really on his list of abilities, but Caden really don't know any better. But when Caden steps through, not only is the cart disconnected, but he's trapped in that disconnected cart with the Bloodless. And these guys, as far as we know right now, they're kind of like the minions of the House of Conquest. And it took Caden a little while to realize what was really going on, because he had tunnel vision trying to catch the Immortal Man who he had seen before, because he wanted to talk to him because he had so many questions to ask. But eventually it gets to the point where the Bloodless like fully transform out of their disguise, and at this point you just really can't miss them. But the way this was set up, the whole follow the hologram and walking into this cart, this whole thing was a trap. And the Infinite Woman set this up so Caden would tell her everything that the Immortal Man showed him. And he ain't waste no time, he was telling them everything. But right when this happened, this is when we see the 4 that survived from the campus, they show up to get him out of there. And it really had been a race between these two, because the Immortal Men, just like the House of Conquest, they have been trying to find Caden. And that's how you had this really crazy race to see who would find him first. And as far as their names from top to bottom, left to right, you have Ghostfist, Timber, Reload, and Stray. And we still have a way to go as far as learning more about these different characters. As far as Ghostfist, we know he can teleport people to different places, and I believe that he was brought into the Immortals around the 1920s. Reload, I believe he was brought in around the 1980s, and I'm not really sure about the other two, but we'll flesh that out as we learn more as we go along. But I will say, getting into the series, I'm excited about it, and like 90-something% of that is because of Dark Knight's Metal. And I am interested in learning how Caden is the key to saving the Immortal Men, but most of my interest lies more into the secrets of the different houses and how they connect over a number of centuries, especially if we see some crazy twists with the Batman Who Laughs connecting the two different tribes. Yeah, so there's a whole lot to look for in this series, and personally, I'm looking forward to all of it. And yeah, of course, some things a little more than others, but nonetheless, Immortal Men seems to be one of those series that you want to hop into from day one or you'll regret it later on. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again next time. Alright, later.